turning my attention to a starter. So I'm going to clean this up and see if it works. This is my setup for testing a starter. 12-volt source, positive to large terminal on the contact, and then the negative is attached to an ear, which is ground, and then jumper wire is connected to the S or starter or start, or that's how I remember it, maybe for something else. And so then you just energize that S. And it works great. So now we'll put it on the car. I installed the rebuilt carburetors, and part of that was the choke pieces here. One thing to remember, 61 was a year of manual chokes, but since this engine has been swapped over, it came with the thermal springs that as they get hot they push the rod, and that is what controls the opening and closing of the choke butterfly. So the fuel lines are hooked up now. The throttle shaft across there is connected, and that works. I still need to deal with the shaft that's coming from the pivot on the automatic transmission. Oh, let's see, what else? I did discover that the distributor, while it has the little piece that sticks out for vacuum advance, does not have a vacuum advance, nor does the car have a coil, which normally mounts on the face here. There's a bolt, and then other late models, I'm sorry, not other late, on late models, some of them it mounts on the rear wall of the engine compartment. So I need to do some hunting for those, and I still need, like I said, to deal with the vacuum line off of that crossover. So make myself a note. I mean, it could be in a box. I would have thought I'd seen it by now, and I don't remember seeing it, but who knows? We'll look around before we order any of them. When I drop the pan, it appears that I've got where I need it to be. So the key is, as I move the cable, that pivot will adjust. So I've got it in right, and basically it's okay. So there's this piece right there, and the cage is at the other end of it. So like I said, as I move this, so I had actually gotten it in correctly. I didn't trust it, so that's why I pulled the pan off, but I clean up the bolts and put the pan back on. We'll move on to putting these retainer plates, those two, and then there's two on the outside come in, and then there's one along the back. I guess in keeping with the spirit, so in keeping with the spirit of galvanization, we will use that one. So I need to find myself some screws to attach that. So that retainer is installed. Unfortunately, one of the things you get with the late models are just a little, a late model powertrain versus an early models. There are just some slight differences. I think that slight differences resulted in that piece not being long enough. So it would have been nice to have the engine compartment sealed, but there are other openings to the outside that air can get in anyway. So that was one of the four. These wagons are different than all the other early models, that I've seen. This retainer here, very interesting. 2 screws from this face, 2 screws going this way into that, and then another one facing out. Yeah, definitely different. And the other side is different still. The driver's side, the screws went in horizontal, these go in vertical, and it's just a flat. So I'm not sure why they didn't do the same thing on both sides, but they didn't. So anyway, those are all done. Those seem to have attached to the seal, rubber seal material, just fine. The exhaust packing gaskets, whatever you want to call, have slipped over the end of the pipe. They just get captured in there and crushed into that. And I'm going to put there it is up there. I'm going to put NICs on all 4 studs and then mount this pipe. And we will call that the correct muffler for a Lakewood. It's slid all the way up on the now installed exhaust pipe, and it sticks out quite nicely. I think with the hanger in place, I'll be able to pull it and get it over into where it needs to be in that direction. Also can spin it a little bit too, and that should rotate it around closer. So if you're interested, this came from Amazon, but it is a Walker Sound FX part number 18449. And also there's a number up there, 90911129. So in order to get the hanger installed correctly, let's see, there. In order to get this hanger installed correctly, you have to remove that bolt, and I think there's another one on the inside of the engine compartment. And then this slides up, and the screws go through there, and that then has a strap that goes around it. So one thing at a time, we'll get the bolts out, install that hanger. So this plate here is the same as the plate that was riveted to the hanger here. So I didn't remove the 2 screws here, 2 screws here, a screw there, screw on the other side, and that allowed this to slide out. That just went in its place. It's a lot easier to do all that with the muffler out. So I'll put the muffler back in. I need to find the strap. It's around here somewhere. So that's my next little project, is to find the strap. So the strap that I had was for a Post 61. Anyway, they have a muffler that got used after the first couple of years that was oval instead of cylindrical. So what I did was I cut off some because it was way too long. I screwed that end into the portion I'll show you on the hanger, and then wrapped it around and kind of just ballparked where this bend needed to be. So I cut that off, ended up shaving some off of the outer. See how this has been thinned down so that it fits through the slot in the hanger. I'll show you where that goes now. Okay, so this comes in from the back side, slides through the slot. That's engaged. And then you come under here, and this bolt will go through and into the other end of the hanger. So I will use 2 hands to do that. Alright, so nothing would be easy. You can see how far that gap is, and sure enough, there's no way to get the rear grille on. So then I decided to compare. This was that aforementioned plate for the hanger, and when I set it up next to this, let's see if I can do this to be seen. It's gonna hang such that it pushes the muffler outboard more than the one that's in there does. Although, well, maybe not. When it's up in place, will it? Well, or anyway, we're gonna go with that for now. And just it'll be functional. So while I'm under here, I figured I'll go ahead and install this engine mount cover. It slides on the outside of each of those shrouds to seal it off. 2 screws up into the shroud, and then 2 screws into here. These are more bolts in terms, they have fine threads, and I believe that these are more screw-like with a coarser thread, and so we'll find 2 of each of those. And a few more things to do while the car's up on jack stands. That plate is installed. I've got this little harness, and it connects the solenoid to the main wiring harness. This yellow wire, I believe, is like something to do with going to the coil and providing full 12 volts when you're cranking. And then the purple wire is what excites the S pole or starter pole on the solenoid to close the electromagnet. So I'm going to run those 2 ends through that hole, which also has the battery cable positive that goes to the battery, which is temporary. There's a temporary one in there. So we'll see what happens. So I need to be careful on how I route the battery cable and the wire harness, etc., because I need to make sure that I don't interfere with that linkage. Still get out of there, and I need a grommet there. That's imperative. All right, back underneath the car. That washer and E-clip are necessary to attach. I'll show you here. I'll get underneath. Okay, so the throttle shaft comes into the TV, or the accelerator shaft, and there's a groove in it. So the washer goes on, the E-clip goes on. Alright, light helps, but the washer and the E-clip are on. And now, working at the other end, which has this going into that hole, So I'll work on that. I've got the parts in the envelope. So I was able to find another E-clip that is on, captured. E-clip on the back side. Couple last things to do. I need to connect those two tubes with a piece of rubber hose. That's the fuel line. And I also want to bring down, looks like I don't have something to bring down. I need to get a hose from this. I need to get a hose from here back up into there, and that provides hot air. Not critical right now, so we'll go ahead and lower the car after we put the wheels on. It's got a battery in here, and we need a new terminal. That'll work for now, and it is connected to the positive on the battery through there. We've got a negative that's grounding on the engine. This wire back in here takes positive to through the connector into the rest of the car. And we've disconnected the starter exciter wire. The thing I'm doing now is we checked the oil, it's up. I say we, I've got a helper today, a 9-year-old who is enjoying doing this. And I'm gonna take the spark plugs out so that we can freely spin the engine using the starter and see if we can get some oil pressure. Right now, I'm not getting any lights on the dash, and I'm not sure why, but we'll come back to that. So I have my automotive assistants out here, and Zachary is going to energize the starter. That's a great place. You're safe there. So go ahead and touch it. All right. Thank you. So that's without the plugs in. That's why the starter turns so freely. We don't have the belt on. That's why the fan's not turning. So we're going to move on and try to figure out electrical issues. And let's fix up some of the electrical in here. First thing, get the cap off the distributor and install the diaphragm for the vacuum advance. And then we will also install coil and a bracket and deal with putting the condenser on here in the proper manner. And then there's the matter of wires. I need to extend the wire for the pressure temp or the pressure sensor to here. It's too short. This wire, I'll have to figure out where it goes. I believe it's going to go here on one end, and then this wire back here, it needs to also go there. And finally, there is one more, well, maybe not, maybe that's the only two that need to go there. I have this one here needs to go to the positive of the battery, and then I have on order a terminal for this negative and a terminal for the positive coming in there. Yeah, so let's get those things out of the way. Time to terminate these battery cables. This one's a good length, and this one is too long. And I've got new terminals here, and we'll do some cleaning of the copper there. We'll cut this one to the right length, strip some insulation off, and then hook them up to the battery. All right, that's good to go. Positive's still a little long. I may give that a twist to pull this farther away. Everything's clearing the carburetor, which is key. Originally this was a generator instead of an alternator. It was much longer. I think this wire that came out of the harness had a shorter distance to go. So I pulled back the tape to get enough length to come against the backside of that single terminal on the alternator. The other end, I put a terminal on it and connected the wire there to give me power from the battery to the rest of the system, and also a path back for charging to the battery. So now we'll see what happens when I turn the key. Hopefully I don't make smoke. I'm assuming that the ohmmeter manufacturer has accounted for the resistance of these two leads. So now if I go directly from the post to that post, I'm getting a reading now under 3. So, yep, 1.8, 1.7. So that's less than 2. So we're going to call this a usable coil. Ugly but usable. Next thing I need to do now is figure out how to put on a new condenser where the lead needs to go, because this lead just broke off. I think it grounds to the body of, or this bracket. We'll see. This condenser is really a capacitor. It needs to connect to the positive terminal to absorb any spikes in the electricity that comes through when the points open and close. It grounds through its case, so I cleaned up the inside of this holder strap and cleaned up the interfaces here to the housing, to the bracket of the coil, and then also cleaned up the mounting faces both sides of this so that it will ground to the engine block. My other issue, and I've cleaned up all these terminals up here, my other issue though is that I need to extend this lead. So I'm going to cut it off, and with this same gauge wire and the correct blade terminal, I'm going to get it connected up. So it's installed now. Right now we can put it in the car, and it mounts right in there. There's a couple of screws. Now there's that one down at the bottom and that one down there. So at least on 61s, there were 2 hot supply wires coming to the positive terminal of the coil. One was connected to the solenoid to provide full 12 volts at starting time or while cranking, and then the other one is a reduced voltage. There's a resistor in line. Reason for that is that when you're running, you don't need as hot a spark, and you don't burn out your points by putting a full 12 volts across that gap. The key is on. These leads are connected, and when I touch the positive, lo and behold, almost 12 volts. So that's good. Just curious what I can't reach it from here. I guess again. So the back side of this terminal is coming in over 12 volts. So we're seeing a little bit of a voltage reduction. Now I've also connected up the negative of the coil to the points. When they open and close, that collapses and energizes the windings in there to get the high voltage out of the center lead. Do the starter. So purple wire, so the yellow wire goes on the bottom. And then the purple wire goes on the top. Much easier with 2 hands. Okay, I guess we'll see. Nothing is in the way here. We'll see what happens when we turn the key, see if the engine spins. That would be nice. Look at that. So I do not have any idiot lights on here because they're not hooked up back there. One would hook up to the electrical system, and that is the gen fan light, and then the other one needs to hook up to that pressure sensor, the terminal on there, and then part of that harness continues around to a temp sensor that's screwed into the head. This is the connection, and I'll probably jumper it for now. This should be closed because there's no pressure, this being the oil pressure switch, but I don't get zero. Alright, so when I've got the probe stuck in the leader tab, I get little resistance. So I guess we'll move on to replacing that. Lovely. It's not fun when the alternator generator's in the way. I have to remove this fuel line, hopefully sneak in and get it. So I removed the oil pressure switch after removing the wheel off of the alternator, the pulley, that's it, which is here. In order to do that, you have to, and again, this is a newer alternator, so it's metric. You have to hold the shaft with the hex key, and then the nut spins off. Actually spins off in the what you would expect. I will now extend. I'm just going to use this jumper to extend the signal, but I did get a light on under the dash, so I'll put everything back. Before putting the alternator pulley back on, I did take it over to the wire brush and clean the groove, because rust in that groove will really chew up the fan belt. Alright, I'm putting a little gas down in the bowl. A little gas down in the throat. Let's hit the key, or what is the key? It's on up there. Okay, now it runs.